Hello, and today we're going to do a really short tutorial on how to use this worksheet, right? It's expectations and boundaries. Now I go more in depth into this in webinar 288, but I want to do a high level run through with you here. So if you just need kind of a quick refresher, or you just want to kind of get right into it. So let's talk about this. All the problems you have that are seemingly external. So somebody at work, a spouse, a child, traffic, your boss, any issues you have with something that is outside of you, a restaurant not having your food, a grocery store not carrying something you need, all of these are external. That is what this worksheet is for. If what you're struggling with is your internal dialogue about yourself, you want to go back and do the brain dump worksheet. That is more internal. It's not about necessarily somebody else, it's more about you and your feelings and thoughts about yourself. So this is external, and this is how we're going to talk about it. So the first thing you need to know is you're upset about something. It's either an unmet expectation or it's a boundary issue. It's one of those two. The sheet's going to help you pick it apart and figure that out. So the first thing is describe your problem here. So for this, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to turn on my resistance a little bit here. What we're going to do is we're going to kind of purge, get everything out on paper. So for example, we're going to use the situation, and I talked about this in webinar 288. This woman was a coaching client of mine. She wanted to craft every night, but every night her daughter would come in and interrupt that time. So her problem was she had an expectation. She wanted to craft. She wanted to get in her room and work on her projects. And around 9:30 every night, she's kind of done with the day. She's exhausted. She's been working full time. And then her daughter comes in and interrupts and wants to talk about her day and tell her about her things. So the problem, she's not crafting. The issue seemingly outside of herself is her daughter's coming in her room and interrupting her. The next question, what did you want to happen? How did you see the situation playing out in your head? So in our mind, we have a movie constantly playing. We see things happening in a certain way. I'm going to get out of work. I'm going to hit the store. I'm going to get what I need. I'm going to get home by this time. Like we have it kind of in our mind how the day will play. So this woman had an expectation, right? She was going to hit about 9:30, go to her room, work on her craft. She saw herself sitting in there enjoying her time, closing the door, being left alone. That is what she saw in her mind. How did the outcome of the situation affect your time, work, stress, or personal needs? So the fact the daughter came in interrupted her personal need of craft time, being in by herself, inward. In this case, it probably created a little bit of stress, right? And time-wise, it took away that time she had for her crafting. So you see how we're kind of looking at this. If you're thinking about your work, if this was a work-related situation, it might be now that you have more work on your plate than you did before, something to that effect. Now, this is the interesting one. In what way were your resources not respected? So if you haven't taken the boundary series yet, you have resources. Obviously, most of you are familiar with time and money, right? Those are the two big ones. Another resource you have is your expertise or something you're naturally good at, some kind of trait or quality you have that you bring to the table. It could be a great personality, it could be you're caring and you would listen to people. We all have different traits that people will try to use when they can, and we have to be somewhat protective of it. We have to put boundaries around it, okay? So that way we're continuing to be healthy and able to do what we want to do. So just a kind of idea of your resources, your abilities, your time, your money. Okay, these are all resources. So how was her resources not respected? Well, her ability to craft wasn't respected because she didn't get to do it, right? Her gift of being a good listener was being taken advantage of because this isn't the time she wanted to do that. Her other resource of time was being taken away. So you really get a chance to break down how were your resources affected by whatever the situation is. Now, the next one, page 2, pretend you knew this outcome would happen. What would you have done differently? Now, this is where you start to turn it and take action and responsibility. So if I knew my daughter was coming into my room and would interrupt my craft time, I could do a lot of things. I could sit down with her an hour before, have a conversation with her, let her get all her stuff out for the day. Tell her, I'm going to my room now to craft. I'm going to shut my door. Please don't interrupt me, right? I can take those proactive actions. I can talk to her about boundaries and explain that when I'm in my room with my door shut, I don't want to be interrupted. And if she has any questions, she can check in with me the next day, or she could send me a note, or she could leave something on my door and I'll read it and we'll talk about it in the morning. Kind of giving her some parameters, right? Another thing I could have done is move my crafting time. I could make it first thing in the morning, possibly. So there's a lot of things, if I knew that I was going to be interrupted, I could have done differently. Maybe I could take an entire Sunday, block it out, and make that my entire crafting for an entire week if I want, right? I could change up so many different aspects. So the next question is, what can change your expectations or the situation and outcome? So in this case, this client was very honest, and she said, Heather, if I don't get to craft, I'm a miserable person. I need this for me. It's part of my identity. It makes me feel good. It makes me a better mom. It makes me a better friend. I've got to do some crafting. So she's not willing to give it up. The outcome or the situation or the outcome would have to change. So we would want to focus on that. So what we do is we say, okay, in the situation, let's go back to that previous question. If I knew this was going to happen, what could I do? Well, you might say, I will book every Sunday as my craft. I'll take 8 hours and just work on my crafting the entire day. Maybe that doesn't fit within your family structure. So then what you have to do is set those firmer boundaries and tell your daughter, look, during these times it's not going to work, right? The next time this situation occurs, how can you safeguard yourself and your expectations? How can you put yourself in a situation where this does not occur again? Going back to our example with the daughter, sitting down, setting those boundaries, explaining to her if she comes in the room, you're going to ask her to leave. Have the expectation she will try to interrupt you a few times. You're going to have to redirect her and be firm with your boundaries. She's not going to know that you're serious until you actually follow through. So if you have the expectation she may come in and still interrupt, you've set the clear boundaries with her, you then have to do the follow through. You play that scenario out in your head versus the one where you just go to your room, craft, and everyone magically leaves you alone, right? The next one is, what do you need? What boundary do you need to create for yourself? So the boundary for yourself is, this craft time is very important to me. I'm going to make my family aware of it. I'm going to even put a little sign on my door. And I'm going to expect that they leave me alone for this 1 hour that I need for crafting every single night. So we set those boundaries for yourself. The last question, how will you share this boundary with others? Focus on statements of I and not you. Be clear on what will happen if the boundary is not honored. So this is a place for you to practice. So for example, if I'm talking to my daughter, I don't want her to feel like this has anything to do with her, because it doesn't. This is all about me. It's about my need. It's about me having to have some time to myself. It's about me saying, I give and give and give. This is my 1 hour of craft time. So what I would do is I'd sit down with her, and this is what I'd write on paper. I will go to her and say, I need some time to be creative. I do better when I am creative. I'm a better mom, a better wife, a better friend. And my one time that I can focus on this is at night from, say, 9:30 to 10:30. I expect to be left alone during that time. I will schedule time with you the rest of the day, or at least an hour before I go in to do my crafting, for us to talk about whatever you would like to talk about. But this is something I have to do for myself. Notice in all of those statements, they were I except for one, right? Which was, I will make time for you. So in this case, it's about, I have a need. This is what I expect. This is what I am going to do. Now, here's the follow through. I need this time for myself. I'm going to shut the door. I'll put a little note so to remind you that this is my 1 hour of crafting time. If it's something that's really important, I'm going to leave a sticky tab. Please write it down. And first thing in the morning when we get up and we're getting ready to go to school, I'm going to talk to you about that then. But when I'm in the middle of my crafting time, I'm asking that you do not open the door. If she does, and this is that part of the follow through, if you do come in, I'm going to escort you out, shut and lock the door. Very clear boundaries and parameters. So hopefully you are seeing how this worksheet is going to take you from the problem to figuring out why it's a problem, like what is it about this that's making it an issue, You will then see how your expectation is playing into this, how a lack of maybe boundaries is playing into this, and then help you resolve it. This could be a very powerful tool if you use it every single time, okay? But there has to be the follow through. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to leave them right below the video. Talk to you soon.